My name is Caroline, 35 years old, and I used to believe in perfect love. 8 years of marriage to James, all shattered in an instant. That morning I came home early to prepare his surprise birthday dinner. Strange sounds from our bedroom caught my attention. The door was slightly open. What I saw next froze my blood. My husband in our bed with another woman. If you have ever felt betrayed, please like this video and let me know where you are watching from. Subscribe to hear my story because the ending will leave you speechless. I met James at a summer concert in Chicago 9 years ago. It was one of those perfect July evenings when the air feels electric with possibility. I was there with my college friends, celebrating my new job at an interior design firm. He stood out immediately in the crowd, tall with dark hair and the most genuine smile you'd ever seen. When our eyes met across the venue, it felt like one of those movie moments you never believe actually happen in real life. My friend Natalie noticed our exchange and practically pushed me toward him. James was there with his brother, and we spent the entire concert talking more than listening to the music. By the end of the night, we had exchanged numbers, and he called me the very next day, not texted, called. That was the first thing that made James different from other men I had dated. Our courtship was whirlwind, but not reckless. Over that first year, we learned everything about each other. James worked in financial management at a prestigious firm downtown. He was ambitious, but not at the expense of his personal life. He talked about his family with such warmth, especially his grandmother, who had raised him after his parents died in a car accident when he was 12. I admired his resilience, how he had overcome such tragedy to become a successful, balanced person. After exactly 1 year of dating, James proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan. He had arranged a private sunset boat ride and got down on one knee as the sky turned brilliant shades of orange and pink. I said yes without hesitation. 6 months later, we were married in a garden ceremony with 100 of our closest friends and family. The first few years of marriage were everything I had hoped for. We moved into a small apartment downtown, saving for our dream home. On weekends, we would visit open houses just for fun, pointing out what we loved and envisioning our future. 3 years into our marriage, we had saved enough for a down payment on a beautiful 2-story house in the suburbs. It had a spacious kitchen for me to cook in a home office for James and a spare bedroom we planned to turn into a nursery someday. My career in interior design was flourishing. I had started taking on private clients alongside my firm work, and my name was beginning to be recognized in Chicago design circles. James was supportive, helping me set up a website, and often bringing home flowers when I landed a new client. His own career was demanding, requiring occasional business trips to New York or Los Angeles, but he always made time for us when he returned, bringing small gifts and sharing stories from his travels. Around our 4th anniversary, we decided to start trying for a baby. I had always imagined having children, and James seemed equally excited. We transformed the spare room into a beautiful nursery, painted a soft green that would work for any gender. I designed every detail myself, from the handcrafted crib to the star pattern on the ceiling. But months passed, then a year, with no pregnancy. After 18 months of disappointment, we consulted fertility specialists. The doctors found no obvious issues, but suggested the stress of trying might be working against us. Each negative test became harder to bear. I would find myself crying in the beautifully decorated nursery that remained empty. James would hold me during these moments, whispering that we would keep trying, that we had time, that maybe we could consider adoption. These tender moments made me feel that despite this challenge, our bond was unbreakable. We were facing this disappointment together, or so I thought. Life continued, and we adjusted our expectations. We got a golden retriever named Bailey, who became our baby. We travelled more, took cooking classes together, and focused on building our careers. On the surface, we had recovered from the disappointment, rebuilding our life around new dreams, But looking back, I can see that something had shifted subtly between us, a hairline fracture in the foundation of our marriage. 6 months ago, the cracks began to widen. James started travelling more frequently for work. 2-day trips stretched to 4 days, sometimes a full week. When home, he was distracted, constantly checking his phone and taking calls in another room. He claimed it was a big new client, a potential promotion on the horizon. I believed him because I had no reason not to. New behaviours emerged that I tried to ignore. James started working out more intensely, bought new clothes without consulting me, even though we had always shopped together before. He began using a new cologne, one I had not chosen for him. Small changes, each explainable on its own, but together they formed a pattern I refused to acknowledge. He became inconsistent in his attentiveness. Some days he would bring home flowers and suggest date nights like in our early years. Other days, he was distant, coming home late with vague explanations about client dinners or work emergencies. The inconsistency was more confusing than consistent neglect would have been. It kept my hope alive while slowly poisoning it. Bailey seemed to sense the change too. Our dog had always been more attached to James, following him from room to room, but lately, Bailey stayed by my side as if offering comfort for something I had not yet fully recognised. I confided some of my concerns to my friend Sophie over lunch one day. She asked gently if I had considered that James might be having an affair. I dismissed the idea immediately, perhaps too forcefully. Sophie backed off, but her question planted a seed I could not uproot. Still, I convinced myself these changes were simply the result of work pressure. The financial industry was competitive, and James had always been ambitious. With his company expanding into international markets, it made sense that his workload and stress had increased. I told myself that once this phase passed, we would return to normal. As his birthday approached, I saw an opportunity to reconnect. I planned a special evening, just the two of us. I would prepare his favourite meal, baked salmon with rosemary potatoes, and that chocolate soufflé he loved from our honeymoon in Paris. I found the perfect gift too, an expensive watch he had admired months ago in a shop window, but considered too extravagant to purchase for himself. I convinced myself that this celebration would bridge whatever gap had formed between us, that the thoughtfulness of my gesture would remind him of our bond, of how well I knew him, of why we had chosen each other. I believed with all my heart that we just needed to reconnect, to remember. How naive I was, standing in that jewelry store spending $3,000 on a watch for a man who was already giving his time to someone else. The day everything changed started like any other. It was a Thursday in April, unusually warm for spring in Chicago. I woke up alone, as I often did these days. James had left early for a breakfast meeting with clients. He kissed my forehead before leaving, a gentle gesture that had once been accompanied by whispered endearments, but now felt perfunctory, a habit rather than an expression of affection. I had a busy morning of client meetings, but had arranged to leave work early to prepare for his birthday celebration. My last appointment finished at 2, and I stopped at the specialty grocery store to buy ingredients for dinner. The cashier commented on my selections, asking if I was celebrating something special. I smiled and told her about the birthday surprise, feeling a renewed sense of excitement and purpose. My next stop was the jewelry store to pick up the watch I had put on hold. The salesperson remembered me and brought out the elegantly wrapped package. The blue box felt heavy in my hands, weighted with my hopes for the evening. I imagined the look on James' face when he opened it, the way his eyes would light up in genuine surprise. I desperately wanted to see that unguarded joy again. On the drive home, I mentally rehearsed the evening. I would have dinner ready by 7, candles lit, his favourite jazz playing softly in the background. I had even bought a new dress, something that reminded me of what I would have worn when we first met. I was determined to recapture the magic of our early relationship. As I turned onto our street, I was so absorbed in these thoughts that I almost missed it, the silver BMW in our driveway. James' car. My mind immediately tried to find explanations. Perhaps the meeting had been cancelled. Maybe he was not feeling well and came home early. I checked the time just after 3:30, much too early for him to be home normally. I pulled into the garage beside his car and noticed it was still warm. He had arrived only shortly before me. For a moment, I considered calling out to him when I entered, not wanting to spoil the surprise I had planned. But curiosity about his unexpected presence kept me quiet as I opened the door. The house seemed unnaturally still. Bailey did not come running to greet me as usual. I set my bags down in the kitchen and listened. That is when I heard it, a muffled sound from upstairs. Thinking James might indeed be sick, I moved toward the staircase. Each step I took felt heavier than the last. My heart began to race, though I could not articulate why. A strange feeling settled in my stomach, a premonition perhaps, or simply my body recognizing what my mind refused to acknowledge. At the top of the stairs, I heard more distinct sounds coming from our bedroom. A woman's laugh, hushed voices, the creak of our bed. The sound was so familiar, yet so out of place in the middle of a Thursday afternoon that my brain struggled to process it. I stood frozen outside our bedroom door, which was not fully closed. A sliver of light spilled into the hallway. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. Part of me wanted to turn around, walk back down the stairs, and drive away, to preserve for a few moments longer the life I thought I had, but I could not. With a gentle push, the door swung open wider, revealing a scene that would forever divide my life into before and after. James was in our bed, our marriage bed, with a woman I recognized, Amanda from his office. Her red hair spread across my pillowcase, her clothes scattered across the floor alongside his. They did not notice me immediately, too engrossed in each other. Time seemed to stop. The world narrowed to this single horrific tableau. I could not breathe, could not move, could not even make a sound. It was as if I had stepped outside my body and was watching the scene from above, detached and floating. Then Bailey, who had been lying quietly in the corner of the room, noticed me and barked. James and Amanda froze, then turned toward the door in unison. The look on James' face when he saw me standing there cycled rapidly through shock, fear, and guilt. Amanda scrambled to cover herself with the sheet, our sheet, from our bed, while James jumped up, reaching for his discarded pants. "Caroline," he gasped, "this is not what it looks like." The absurdity of that statement in the face of such obvious betrayal broke my paralysis. A laugh escaped my throat, bitter and unrecognizable even to myself. "Really, James, not what it looks like, because it looks like you are having sex with your co-worker in our bed." Amanda would not meet my eyes, her face flushed with embarrassment or shame, I could not tell which. She clutched the sheet tighter, as if modesty mattered at this point. "Caroline, please let me explain," James was saying, stepping toward me, with his hands raised as if approaching a frightened animal. "It is just things have been so difficult between us and Amanda and I. It just happened. Just happened." My voice rose with each word. "Things like this do not just happen, James. You made choices. Choices to lie, to betray, to destroy everything we built." I remembered the heavy package in my hand, the watch I had so carefully selected. With a sudden, violent motion, I hurled it across the room. It hit the wall and fell to the floor, the sound of breaking glass satisfying in its finality. "Happy birthday," I said, my voice eerily calm now. Amanda was gathering her clothes, slipping into her blouse with trembling hands. "I should go," she murmured, not to me but to James, as if I had ceased to exist, as if this was between them now. "Yes, you should," I agreed, stepping aside from the doorway. "And take him with you." James was still trying to explain, words tumbling out in a desperate stream, how it had not meant anything, how he still loved me, how we could work through this. Each word was like a knife twisting deeper. I turned my back on them both and walked down the stairs, my legs somehow carrying me, despite feeling like they might collapse at any moment. I grabbed my purse from the kitchen counter, leaving the groceries where I had set them. Bailey followed me, whimpering softly as if sensing my distress. "Stay," I told him at the door, not wanting to leave him, but unable to think clearly about what to do with our dog at that moment. "I will come back for you." I got into my car and drove away, tears finally breaking free and streaming down my face. I had no destination in mind, just the overwhelming need to be anywhere but there. The life I had known was shattered, and I had no idea how to begin picking up the pieces. The next few hours passed in a blur of tears and aimless driving. My mind replayed the scene in our bedroom on an endless loop, each time hoping for a different outcome, each time confronted with the same devastating reality. The image of James with Amanda burned into my consciousness, impossible to unsee. Eventually, I found myself parked outside Sophie's apartment building. I had not consciously decided to go there, but my subconscious had guided me to the one person I knew would take me in without judgment. I sat in the car for nearly 20 minutes, trying to compose myself enough to go inside. My phone had been buzzing continuously with calls and texts from James, which I ignored. Finally, I made my way to Sophie's door. When she opened it, one look at my face told her everything she needed to know. Without a word, she pulled me into a tight embrace as fresh sobs racked my body. She guided me to her couch and simply held me while I cried, not asking questions, just providing the silent support I desperately needed. When the crying finally subsided enough for me to speak, I told her everything, my words coming in broken, disjointed sentences. Sophie listened, her expression shifting from sympathy to anger on my behalf. "I knew something was wrong," she admitted, passing me another tissue. "The way he has been acting at our group gatherings, always checking his phone, making excuses to leave early, and at David's birthday last month, I saw him talking very intensely with Amanda in the corner. I told myself I was imagining things." Her words brought a fresh wave of humiliation. "Did everyone know except me?" Sophie squeezed my hand. "No, honey. I had suspicions, not certainty. And I was not sure if I should say anything. I was afraid you would be upset with me for suggesting it." "Who else do you think knew?" She hesitated before answering. "Mark mentioned something about seeing James having lunch with a red-headed woman downtown a few weeks ago. He assumed it was a client." Mark was James' best friend, someone who had been in our wedding party. The thought that he might have known or suspected and said nothing felt like another betrayal piled onto the first. "How could I have been so blind?" I whispered, staring down at my wedding ring, the diamond catching the light in Sophie's living room. With a sudden movement, I pulled it off and placed it on the coffee table. The indentation on my finger looked strange, a pale band of skin marking where the ring had been for 8 years. "You trusted him," Sophie said simply. "That is not blindness, Caroline. That is what you are supposed to do in a marriage." As evening fell, the initial shock began to give way to physical symptoms of stress. My hands would not stop shaking. I felt alternately hot and cold. When Sophie offered me soup, the smell sent me rushing to the bathroom where I vomited my body, rejecting nourishment, just as my mind was rejecting this new reality. Sophie made up her guest room for me and lent me pajamas since I had left with nothing but the clothes on my back. As I lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed again. Against my better judgment, I looked at it. 23 missed calls from James, 47 text messages ranging from apologies to explanations to pleas. The latest one read, "Please come home so we can talk. I made a terrible mistake. Amanda means nothing to me. It is you I love." I turned the phone off, completely unable to bear any more of his words. The audacity of his claim that Amanda meant nothing only highlighted the casual cruelty of his betrayal. If she meant nothing, then he had destroyed our marriage for something he considered meaningless. Sleep eluded me that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. Worse were the moments when my mind drifted to happier memories, the proposal by the lake our wedding day, buying our house only to be violently yanked back to the present, with the knowledge that those memories were now tainted, perhaps even fraudulent. Had he ever been faithful? Had anything in our marriage been real? By morning, my eyes were swollen from crying and a pounding headache had settled behind them. Sophie brought me coffee and sat on the edge of the bed. "What do you want to do today?" she asked gently. I had no answer. The concept of making decisions, even small ones, seemed overwhelming. The future I had planned, the life I had built, had disappeared in an instant. I had no contingency plan for this scenario. "I need to get Bailey," I finally said. "And some clothes, I guess. But I can't face James yet." "I will go with you," Sophie offered immediately. "We will wait until he goes to work, then go to your house. You can stay here as long as you need to." I nodded gratefully, unable to express how much her support meant to me. As terrible as this situation was, at least, I was not facing it entirely alone. Throughout that day, questions kept surfacing in my mind. How long had the affair been going on? Was Amanda the first, or had there been others? What would happen to our house, our finances, our future? Each question opened up new avenues of pain, new dimensions of betrayal to consider. By the second night, exhaustion finally overcame my racing thoughts, and I fell into a fitful sleep. I dreamed of standing in our bedroom doorway, watching James with Amanda, but in the dream, they both turned to look at me and laughed, as if my pain was amusing to them. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, momentarily disoriented, until I remembered where I was and why. The pain had not diminished with sleep. If anything, it had sharpened. But alongside it, something else had begun to stir, a tiny ember of anger. Not the hot, immediate rage I had felt in the moment of discovery, but something cooler and more focused. A voice inside me whispered that I deserved better than this, that I had done nothing to warrant such betrayal, that James' actions reflected his character, not my worth. It was this small spark that eventually got me out of bed on the third day, that helped me shower and dress in clothes Sophie had picked up from a store, since I still had not returned home. It was this spark that made me decide it was time to go back to the house and face whatever came next. I was done hiding. I was done crying. It was time to figure out who I was without James and the lies that had surrounded our marriage. 3 days after discovering James' infidelity, I finally felt strong enough to return to our house. Sophie insisted on coming with me for moral support, and we deliberately chose a time when James would normally be at work. I had texted him my intentions, making it clear I wanted the house empty when I arrived. He had responded immediately, promising to respect my wishes and asking again if we could talk soon. I left that question unanswered. The house looked exactly the same from the outside, a cruel reminder that while my world had imploded, the physical structures of my life remained unchanged. Using my key felt strange, as if I was entering someone else's home rather than the place I had lived for years. Bailey greeted me with ecstatic joy, jumping and whining as if I had been gone for months instead of days. His uncomplicated love brought the first genuine smile to my face since the discovery. James had at least taken good care of him in my absence. "Where should we start?" Sophie asked, standing in the entryway. "Bedroom," I replied, steeling myself. "I need clothes and personal items, and I can't keep avoiding it." Walking up those stairs again was one of the hardest things I had ever done. Each step brought back the vivid memory of what I had seen. At the top, I paused, taking deep breaths to steady myself before pushing open the bedroom door. The room had been cleaned, the bed made with fresh sheets. James had removed all traces of what had happened there, as if he could erase the betrayal by changing linens. The thought made me both angry and sad. I began methodically packing a suitcase with clothes, toiletries, and personal items. Sophie helped silently, occasionally squeezing my shoulder in support. As I opened my jewellery box to retrieve several pieces that had belonged to my grandmother, I noticed the empty space where my wedding ring should have been. I had left it at Sophie's apartment, unable to bear its weight or significance anymore. While gathering documents from my desk, a strange impulse made me open James' bedside drawer. I was not sure what I was looking for, perhaps just some explanation, some clue to help me understand how we had arrived at this point. The drawer contained the usual items: a phone charger, reading glasses, cough drops, a few business cards. But as I was about to close it, I noticed something odd. The drawer had a false bottom, a detail I had never observed in 5 years of living in this house. Using my fingernail, I lifted the panel and discovered a small compartment underneath, containing a metal box with a simple lock. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. I had never seen this box before. It clearly contained secrets James had intentionally hidden from me. Part of me wanted to respect his privacy, but that concern seemed laughable now, given his complete disregard for our marriage vows. "Do you think we can open it?" I asked Sophie, showing her the locked box. She examined it closely. "This is a simple lock. Do you have a small hairpin?" With a hairpin from the bathroom, Sophie worked on the lock for several minutes until we heard a satisfying click. I held my breath as I lifted the lid, uncertain what secrets I might uncover. Inside, I found a collection of hotel receipts from various cities, some matching his business trip destinations, others from hotels right here in Chicago. The dates stretched back nearly 3 years. 3 years of deception, not the recent transgression he had tried to frame it as. Beneath the receipts were handwritten notes, clearly in a woman's handwriting, though not always the same woman. Some were signed with names I did not recognize: Karen, Jessica, Diane. Each contained intimate references and inside jokes that made my stomach turn. There were also several small photographs of James with different women in various locations, his arm around them, looking relaxed and happy. Most devastating of all was a small velvet jewelry box containing a silver bracelet with a heart charm. The receipt tucked inside showed it had been purchased just 2 weeks ago, presumably for Amanda. The price made me wince: $400 for another woman, while he had told me we needed to cut back on household expenses. "Oh, Caroline," Sophie whispered, looking over my shoulder at the evidence of James' serial infidelity. "I am so sorry." The shock of these discoveries left me feeling strangely calm, as if I had moved beyond pain into some new territory of understanding. James' betrayal was not a momentary lapse of judgment, but a deliberate, sustained pattern of deception. Our entire marriage had been built on lies. While replacing the items in the box, intending to take photographs as evidence, I noticed an unfamiliar bank statement tucked at the very bottom. It was for an account at a different bank than the one we used for our joint finances, in James' name only. The balance was substantial, over $70,000 money I had known nothing about. I quickly took photos of everything with my phone, documenting each piece of evidence. My hands had stopped shaking, my movements becoming precise and methodical. This was no longer just about emotional betrayal, it was about financial deception as well. As I was returning the box to its hiding place, planning to confront James with my evidence later, I heard the front door open downstairs. Bailey's excited barking confirmed who it was before James called out. "Caroline, are you here? Your car is outside." Sophie and I exchanged alarmed glances. He was not supposed to be home for hours. My heart rate accelerated as footsteps sounded on the stairs. There was no time to hide the evidence in my hands. James appeared in the doorway, his expression shifting from hope to concern when he saw Sophie, then to obvious fear when he noticed the open metal box in my hands. He was dressed in his work clothes, a crisp blue shirt and navy slacks, looking every bit the respectable financial manager, a perfect disguise for the serial cheater he actually was. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice tight. "That is private." "Private?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping me. "Like your private hotel rooms with Karen, Jessica and Diane, like your private account with $70,000. How many women have there been, James? How long have you been lying to me?" His face drained of colour. "Caroline, you do not understand. Those are work relationships, business contacts. Do not insult my intelligence, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I saw the notes, the pictures. I know what you bought Amanda 2 weeks ago while telling me we needed to budget more carefully. Sophie moved closer to me, a silent show of support. James glanced at her with obvious displeasure. This is between my wife and me, he said coldly. I think you should leave Sophie. I am not going anywhere unless Caroline wants me to, Sophie replied firmly. James stepped further into the room, running his hand through his hair in frustration. Fine. Caroline, can we please talk about this like adults without an audience? I looked at Sophie, considering. Part of me wanted her protection, but another part knew this confrontation was inevitable and perhaps best handled directly. It is okay, Sophie, I said finally. Wait downstairs with Bailey. I will not be long. She hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave me alone with him. Are you sure? I nodded, feeling strangely powerful with the evidence in my hands. I am sure. This will not take long. After Sophie left, James closed the bedroom door and turned to face me. His expression had shifted to one I recognized from client presentations, calm and controlled, ready to manage a difficult situation. Caroline, I know how this looks, but there are explanations for everything in that box. I am listening, I said, sitting on the edge of the bed, the box beside me. Explain to me how you have been cheating on me for at least 3 years. Explain the secret bank account. Explain how you brought another woman into our bed. James paced the room, choosing his words carefully. The women in those notes, they were mistakes, moments of weakness during business trips. They meant nothing, and Amanda, that was the biggest mistake of all. I have been under tremendous pressure at work, feeling disconnected at home with all our fertility issues and disappointments. I was weak, and I am deeply ashamed. And the money, I pressed, refusing to be distracted by his practiced apology. He paused in his pacing. That account is for our future. I was planning to surprise you once it reached a certain amount, maybe for a down payment on a vacation property. The lie was so transparent it almost made me laugh again. A surprise you kept hidden in a locked box with evidence of your affairs. Try again, James. His facade of contrition cracked slightly, revealing a flash of anger. Fine. The money is mine. I earned it through side investments and I kept it separate. Our prenuptial agreement does not entitle you to funds you did not know existed. His words hit me like a physical blow. We had signed a prenuptial agreement at his insistence, something I had not thought much about at the time, believing our marriage would last forever. Now I realized he had been planning escape routes from the beginning. So not only have you been unfaithful, but you have been hiding assets, planning for a future without me. I said, the full extent of his betrayal becoming clearer with each passing moment. That is not what I said. He backpedaled quickly. I just wanted some financial independence. Most of our assets are joined. The house, our main accounts. The house that is primarily in your name, I reminded him. The investment accounts you manage. A calculating look crossed his face. If you are thinking about divorce, Caroline, remember that my name is on most of our assets. My salary has paid the majority of our expenses. My company provided our health insurance. Think carefully about your next steps. The threat was unmistakable. He was warning me that he had the financial upper hand, that challenging him would leave me with nothing. In that moment, I saw James truly for the first time, not as the man I had loved, but as the manipulator he had always been. I need to go, I said, standing up and clutching the metal box. I am taking this with me. That is my property, he protested, moving to block my path. Consider it the first installment of what you owe me, I replied, meeting his gaze directly. 8 years of my life, James. That is what you have taken from me. I pushed past him and walked downstairs, the box tucked under my arm. Sophie and Bailey were waiting in the living room, both rising when they saw me. We are leaving, I told Sophie, then turned to James, who had followed me down. I will be in touch through a lawyer. Do not contact me directly again. As I walked out the door of what had once been my dream home, I felt both terrible grief and unexpected liberation. The life I had known was over, but for the first time in days, I had a clear purpose to uncover the full truth and ensure James could never again use his financial power to control or threaten me. The 2 weeks following my confrontation with James were the darkest of my life. I moved from Sophie's guest room to a small furnished apartment she helped me find, taking Bailey with me after a tense exchange of texts with James. The reality of my situation settled in heavy and suffocating. I had lost not just my husband, but my home, my sense of security, and my vision for the future. Work became nearly impossible. I tried to focus on client projects, but my mind constantly drifted to scenes of betrayal, to questions without answers, to fears about what would come next. My boss, Diane, noticed my distraction and called me into her office. With tears streaming down my face, I explained what had happened. To my surprise, she was incredibly supportive, offering me paid leave to sort through the personal crisis. "Take 3 weeks," she said, handing me tissues. "Your clients will understand and your projects can wait. Take care of yourself first." This unexpected kindness broke something in me. I spent the next 3 days barely functioning, alternating between crying jags and periods of numb silence, staring at the wall of my temporary home. Bailey stayed close, his warm presence the only comfort in my isolation. I lost weight, forgetting to eat, until Sophie or another friend stopped by with food they would practically force me to consume. Sleep became a luxury punctuated by nightmares. In the quiet darkness, my mind would create increasingly elaborate scenarios of James' betrayals, imagining him laughing with his mistresses about how successfully he had fooled me. I would wake up, gasping, heart racing, then lie awake until dawn exhausted, but unable to find rest. During one particularly bad night, I found myself searching online for divorce lawyers at 3 in the morning. That is how I discovered Patricia Winters, described in reviews as ruthless in protecting her clients' interests and specializing in cases involving hidden assets and infidelity. Despite the hour, I sent an email requesting a consultation, then finally fell into a dreamless sleep, the first hint of action bringing a small measure of peace. Patricia met with me 2 days later, a tall, imposing woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and piercing eyes that seemed to absorb every detail. I brought James' metal box with me, laying out the evidence of his affairs and the hidden bank account. After reviewing everything carefully, Patricia looked up at me with a grim smile. "This is a good start, but I suspect there is more we have not found yet. Men like your husband rarely limit their deception to one hidden account." "What do you mean?" I asked. "In my experience, someone who maintains multiple affairs while presenting a perfect facade is often engaged in other forms of deception as well. The patterns of behavior tend to extend to all areas of life, including finances." She tapped her pen against the bank statement. "This account is significant, but does not match the lifestyle pattern you have described. I suspect there may be more." She recommended hiring a private financial investigator to dig deeper into James' finances. "Thomas Rivera is the best. He specializes in uncovering hidden assets in divorce cases, particularly with financial professionals who know how to cover their tracks." The cost made me wince. $5,000 for Thomas' services money. I would have to borrow from my modest savings. But Patricia was insistent. "Consider it an investment in your future. If James has been hiding money, as I suspect, this could be the difference between starting over with nothing and securing your rightful share." I agreed, signing the paperwork to retain both Patricia and Thomas that day. For the first time since discovering James' betrayal, I felt a small sense of control returning, a plan forming where before there had been only chaos and pain. Sophie continued to be my emotional anchor throughout this period. When I confided my fears about the financial investigation, she reminded me of my own strength. "You built a successful career from nothing," she pointed out during one of our coffee sessions. Your clients love you because you are talented and hardworking. James did not give you that. No matter what happens with the divorce, you have skills no one can take away. Her words helped, but the weight of betrayal still pressed heavily on me. I found myself avoiding social gatherings, unable to face friends who might have suspected James' infidelity, and said nothing. The thought of being the last to know, of potentially being pitied or gossiped about, was unbearable. This isolation led to a chance encounter that would prove pivotal. One evening, feeling particularly restless in my small apartment, I took Bailey for a longer walk than usual. At a neighborhood park, Bailey approached another dog, a friendly chocolate lab. As the dogs played, I began chatting with the owner, Melissa. Our conversation turned personal when she commented on Bailey's name tag, which still had both my and James' names on it. When I hesitated in my response, something in my expression must have revealed my pain. Melissa gently asked if everything was okay. Perhaps it was the kindness of a stranger, or simply the need to unburden myself to someone with no connection to my previous life, but I found myself telling her about James' betrayal. To my surprise, she nodded with deep understanding. I went through something similar 3 years ago, she confided. My husband of 12 years had been having an affair with my sister. I found out at Thanksgiving dinner of all places when I overheard them talking in the kitchen. The specificity of her experience, so different yet emotionally parallel to mine, created an immediate bond between us. We sat on a park bench while our dogs played, sharing the particular pain that only those who have experienced such intimate betrayal can understand. "Have you considered joining a support group?" Melissa asked. "It saved my sanity during my divorce. Being around others who truly get it, who do not judge or offer platitudes, made me feel less crazy and alone." She told me about a weekly group that met at a community center nearby, specifically for those dealing with infidelity and divorce. "We are meeting tomorrow night at 7 if you want to come. No pressure to share until you are ready." I found myself agreeing, desperate for any lifeline in the storm I was navigating. The next evening, I almost backed out, sitting in my car outside the community center for 20 minutes before finding the courage to go inside. Melissa was waiting in the hallway, her warm smile a welcome in an otherwise intimidating situation. The group consisted of 8 people at various stages of processing betrayal and divorce. Some, like a man named David, were just weeks into discovery, their pain still raw and bleeding. Others, like Melissa, had moved into a place of healing, offering perspective from further along the journey. When my turn came to speak, I surprised myself with the emotion that poured out. I shared not just the facts of James' betrayal, but the deeper wounds, the questioning of my own judgment, the fear that I had wasted 8 years loving someone who had never truly existed. No one interrupted or offered advice. They simply listened, nodding with understanding, creating a space where my pain could exist without judgment or minimization. When I finished exhausted but somehow lighter, the group facilitator, Elaine, spoke softly. "The path you are on is one of the hardest a person can walk, but I want you to know something important. This betrayal does not define you. It defines the person who committed it. Your worth has not changed even if your circumstances have." Her words pierced the fog of shame and self-doubt that had surrounded me since the discovery. For the first time, I began to see James' actions not as a reflection of my inadequacy, but as a manifestation of his own character flaws. This subtle shift in perspective did not erase the pain, but it created a small opening through which healing might eventually enter. As I left the meeting that night, Melissa handed me a book about rebuilding life after betrayal. "This helped me when I could not sleep," she said, "and my number is inside the cover. Call anytime, day or night. Those 3 a.m. moments are the hardest." I clutched the book like a lifeline on the drive home, feeling the first fragile stirrings of what might eventually become hope. The journey ahead would still be long and difficult, but for the first time, I could envision a future beyond the pain, a life rebuilt on my own terms. 1 month after discovering James' betrayal, I received a call from Thomas Rivera, the financial investigator Patricia had recommended. His voice was calm but held an undercurrent of excitement that immediately caught my attention. "Mrs. Harrington, I have found something you need to see. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" 3 hours later, I sat across from Thomas in his modest downtown office, surrounded by computer monitors and filing cabinets. He was a slight man, with intense eyes and a methodical way of speaking that inspired confidence. "Your husband has been very busy." He began sliding a folder across the desk, and not just with his extramarital affairs. The folder contained documentation of financial activities I had never imagined James capable of. Thomas had uncovered evidence that James had been systematically diverting funds from his company's client accounts into offshore holdings, then transferring portions to his personal hidden accounts. "These transactions are designed to stay just below reporting thresholds," Thomas explained, pointing to a series of transfers. "Small enough to avoid automatic flags, but frequent enough to accumulate significant amounts over time. Based on what I have found so far, he has diverted approximately $350,000 over the past 4 years. I stared at the numbers in disbelief. "This is not just hiding money from me, this is stealing from his company and clients." Thomas nodded grimly. "Exactly. What we are looking at goes beyond the scope of divorce proceedings. This is embezzlement, which is a criminal offence." My mind reeled with the implications. James had not only betrayed me emotionally, but had been engaged in criminal activity throughout our marriage. I had been living with a stranger, sharing my life with someone I had never truly known. "What do I do with this information?" I asked, feeling the weight of this new discovery. "You have several options," Thomas replied. "We can provide this evidence to your divorce attorney, which will certainly strengthen your position in the settlement negotiations. Or you could take this information to James' employer. Or both." I left Thomas' office with copies of all his findings, my thoughts in turmoil. The evidence of James' financial crimes gave me leverage I had not expected, but it also complicated my already painful situation. Using this information meant not just ending my marriage, but potentially sending James to prison. That evening, I called Patricia to discuss the discoveries. Her assessment was straightforward. "This changes everything," she said after I had explained Thomas' findings. "James has been using the threat of financial dominance to intimidate you. Now you have the upper hand. He will likely agree to a very generous settlement rather than risk criminal charges." "I do not want to use this as blackmail," I said, uncomfortable with the idea despite my anger. "This is not blackmail," Patricia corrected firmly. "This is justice. He stole from his clients, hid assets from you, and then threatened you with financial ruin if you did not accept his terms. You are simply ensuring he cannot continue to benefit from his crimes." After much consideration, I decided on a two-pronged approach. Patricia would use the evidence to negotiate a fair divorce settlement, while I would meet with James' boss, Martin Collins, to share what we had discovered. The decision was not about revenge, but about preventing James from continuing to harm others through his deception. Arranging a meeting with Martin proved surprisingly easy. As the managing partner of James' firm, he had met me several times at company functions. When I called requesting a private meeting regarding a sensitive matter concerning James, he agreed immediately, perhaps sensing the seriousness in my voice. 2 days later, I sat in Martin's corner office, the folder of evidence on my lap. He greeted me warmly, but with obvious curiosity about the purpose of my visit. "Thank you for meeting with me, Martin." I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "What I am about to share with you is difficult, but I believe you need to know." I explained about discovering James' affairs, then carefully transitioned to the financial irregularities Thomas had uncovered. As I spoke, Martin's expression shifted from sympathy to grave concern. When I handed him the folder, he reviewed its contents with increasing alarm. "Caroline, I cannot thank you enough for bringing this to my attention," he he said, finally looking up from the documents. I must be honest with you. We had noticed some discrepancies in accounts James managed and had begun an internal audit 2 weeks ago. What you have provided fills in crucial missing pieces. The revelation that the company had already been investigating James brought both relief and validation. I was not simply a vengeful spouse, but someone providing important information about ongoing fraud. Martin assured me that the firm would handle the situation discreetly but firmly. We will need to report this to the regulatory authorities, but we can do so in a way that protects client confidentiality and minimizes public exposure. Your name need not be directly involved if you prefer. He then surprised me with an unexpected offer. Our annual client appreciation event is next Friday. James is scheduled to give the keynote address. I cannot rescind that without raising questions I am not prepared to answer yet. Would you be willing to attend? It would maintain appearances while we complete our investigation. The thought of seeing James in his element, still pretending to be the successful, ethical financial manager, made my stomach turn. But I also recognized the strategic value of Martin's request. By attending, I would be signaling to James that he still had the upper hand, giving him a false sense of security while the noose tightened around him. I will be there, I agreed, already formulating a plan. The week leading up to the event was a blur of activity. Patricia filed our divorce petition with the evidence of hidden assets attached. Thomas continued his investigation, uncovering 2 more accounts James had concealed, and I worked closely with Martin to ensure the company had everything they needed for their case against James. Throughout this period, James continued to send messages alternating between apologies, pleas for reconciliation, and veiled financial threats. I responded minimally, mostly through Patricia, maintaining the illusion that I was still intimidated by his financial position. The night of the client appreciation event arrived. I chose my outfit carefully, a sleek black dress that projected confidence and poise. Sophie accompanied me for moral support, both of us arriving just as the cocktail hour began. James spotted me immediately, his surprise evident in his momentary freeze before he composed himself and approached champagne flute in hand. "Caroline, I didn't expect to see you here," he said, his voice carefully modulated for the public setting. "Martin invited me," I replied simply, accepting a drink from a passing server. "He thought it would look strange if your wife missed your big speech." James seemed to relax slightly, interpreting my presence as a positive sign. "I am glad you came. Perhaps after we could talk, I have been trying to reach you." "Perhaps," I said non-committally, scanning the room. "Is Amanda here tonight?" He flinched at the name. "No, she has been transferred to another department. Caroline, that situation is completely over. It was a mistake." Before I could respond, Martin approached, greeting me warmly with a kiss on the cheek. "Caroline, wonderful to see you. James, we need you for some photographs before your speech." As James was led away, Sophie squeezed my arm supportively. "You are doing great. How are you feeling?" "Strangely calm," I admitted, like I am watching a play I already know the ending to. The event proceeded according to plan. Dinner was served, awards were presented, and then Martin took the stage to introduce James as the evening's keynote speaker. James spoke confidently about trust integrity and the company's commitment to client service, words that now rang hollow in my ears. As he concluded to polite applause, Martin returned to the podium. "Thank you, James, for those inspiring words. Before we continue with the evening, I have a special announcement." This was not part of the script we had discussed. I straightened in my chair, uncertain what was coming. "Tonight we have the privilege of recognizing someone whose courage and integrity exemplify the true values of our firm," Martin continued. "Someone who, when faced with evidence of wrongdoing, chose to do the right thing despite significant personal cost." My heart raced as I realized what was happening. This had not been the plan. We had agreed to handle the matter privately after the event. "Caroline Harrington, would you please join me on stage?" A spotlight found me in the crowd as confused murmurs spread through the room. On shaky legs, I made my way to the stage, passing James, who stood frozen in confusion. Once I reached Martin, he spoke again, his voice carrying clearly through the now silent room. Caroline recently brought to our attention certain irregularities that, upon investigation, revealed significant breaches of trust and fiduciary responsibility within our organisation. James' face drained of colour as understanding dawned. "What are you doing?" he hissed as I passed him. Martin continued, "Thanks to her courage, we have been able to identify and address these issues before further damage could occur. Caroline, on behalf of the firm, I want to thank you publicly for your integrity." He handed me a small plaque, a token gesture that nonetheless symbolized a profound shift in power. As I accepted it, I saw security personnel quietly positioning themselves near James. The authorities would not be far behind. Looking out at the stunned faces of James' colleagues and clients, many of whom had been at our wedding, I found my voice. "Thank you, Martin. Trust and integrity are not just corporate values. They are the foundation of all meaningful relationships, professional and personal. When that trust is broken, we have a choice to remain silent or to speak truth, no matter how painful." My eyes found James, who stood rigid with shock and growing anger. I chose truth. I hope that choice protects others from similar betrayals in the future. The room erupted in applause, though many still looked confused about the specifics of what was happening. As I left the stage, I passed close to James, who grabbed my arm, his fingers digging painfully into my skin. "You will regret this," he whispered, his face contorted with rage. "I will make sure you get nothing." I smiled a genuine smile born of newfound strength. "You already tried that threat, James. It did not work then, and it certainly will not work now." Pulling free from his grip, I walked away, head high, as security personnel moved in. The last image I had of James that night was him being escorted from the room, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Outside in the cool evening air, Sophie found me, concern etched on her face. "Are you okay? That was not what we planned." "No," I agreed, taking a deep breath. It was better. For the first time since this all began, I feel like myself again, stronger, maybe, than I have ever been. As we walked to the car, my phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Just heard what happened. Bold move. James' attorneys called. They want to settle. Full terms. Call me tomorrow." I showed Sophie the message, both of us breaking into relieved laughter that soon gave way to tears, not of sadness, but of release. The road ahead would still be challenging, but the worst was behind me. I had found my voice, my strength, and my path forward, independent of the man who had tried to diminish me. In that moment, standing under the stars, with my true friend beside me, I knew with certainty that I would not just survive this betrayal, but would ultimately thrive beyond it. 1 year after the night, James was publicly exposed at the client appreciation event. I stood in the bright, sunlit living room of my new condominium, surveying the space with satisfaction. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline, filling the room with natural light that highlighted the careful interior design, a blend of modern aesthetics and comfortable warmth. It was my own creation, both the space and the life within it. The journey to this moment had been arduous, but transformative. After James was escorted from the event that night, events moved quickly. The firm filed formal charges, and within days, James was arrested for embezzlement and fraud. The evidence against him was overwhelming, bolstered by what Thomas had uncovered, and the company's own investigation. The divorce proceedings, which I had feared would be protracted and painful, concluded with surprising speed. Faced with criminal charges and the irrefutable evidence of his financial deception, James' attorneys advised him to settle quickly and generously. The final agreement granted me half of all marital assets, including those he had attempted to hide, plus additional compensation for the emotional distress caused by his infidelity. When the dust settled, I found myself financially secure in a way I had not anticipated. The settlement, combined with the sale of our suburban house, provided enough capital for me to purchase this downtown condominium and invest in a long-held dream, my own interior design business. Caroline Harrington Designs opened its doors 6 months ago, specializing in spaces that promote healing and renewal. My first clients came through referrals from Sophie and friends from the support group, but word spread quickly. My personal story of transformation, though I shared it selectively, resonated with clients seeking not just beautiful spaces, but environments that facilitated their own journeys of change. James' trial concluded 3 months ago with a guilty verdict on all counts. He was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison, a significant reduction from the potential maximum due to a plea agreement that required full restitution to his former clients. I attended the sentencing hearing not out of vindictiveness, but as the final step in my own closure. He looked different. In the courtroom, diminished somehow, the confident facade stripped away to reveal the frightened man beneath. When given the opportunity to speak before sentencing, he offered apologies to his clients, his company, and finally to me. The words seemed rehearsed, a performance designed to garner sympathy from the judge. But beneath the script, I sensed genuine regret, not necessarily for his actions, but for their consequences. Our eyes met briefly as he was led away. In that moment, I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, no joy in his punishment, only a profound sadness for what could have been and a deep gratitude that I had escaped a life built on lies. The support group Melissa had introduced me to became a cornerstone of my healing process. Over time, my role evolved from that of a wounded newcomer to someone who could offer guidance and hope to others just beginning their journeys. Elaine, the group facilitator, eventually asked if I would consider leading sessions, occasionally recognizing that my story could inspire others facing similar betrayals. My friendship with Melissa deepened into one of my most treasured relationships. Our dogs' regular play dates became standing appointments, followed by coffee or dinner where we discussed everything from dating disasters to business challenges to the latest Netflix shows. She began dating again 6 months ago, a step I had not yet felt ready to take, though her happiness encouraged me that romance might someday have a place in my life again. Sophie remained my steadfast ally, celebrating each milestone in my recovery and growth. It was Sophie who had orchestrated a housewarming party when I moved into the condominium, filling the new space with laughter and friendship to create positive first memories within those walls. Bailey adapted well to city living, enjoying his walks along the lakefront and the attention he received at the small dog park near our building. His unconditional love had been a constant throughout the upheaval. His simple joy in each day, a reminder that happiness can be found in the smallest moments. My relationship with my parents, somewhat distant during my marriage due to their initial reservations about James, strengthened as they supported me through the divorce. My mother, who had always sensed something off about James but had kept her concerns to herself to avoid causing friction, now visited regularly from Arizona. My father, in his quiet way, had shown his support by helping me navigate the financial aspects of my new independence, drawing on his experience as a retired accountant. The phone ringing interrupted my reflections. It was Patricia calling with news that the last of James' hidden accounts had finally been located and would be included in the restitution payments. With this, the financial entanglements of my marriage were truly concluded. "How does it feel?" Patricia asked after sharing the information. "To have everything finally resolved I considered the question looking around at the home I had created for myself, like the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, cleaner than I expected. After hanging up, I moved to the large drafting table by the window, where sketches for my newest client project were spread out. The design was for a woman in her 50s who was reclaiming her space after her children had moved out and her husband had passed away. She wanted something that honoured her past while creating room for her future, a balance I understood intimately. As I worked on the drawings, adjusting lines and considering colour palettes, I reflected on the lessons of the past year. The betrayal that had once seemed like the end of everything had instead become the catalyst for a new beginning. The pain had been real and devastating, but it had not defined or destroyed me. I had learned to trust my instincts again, to recognize red flags rather than explain them away. I had discovered reserves of strength I never knew I possessed. Most importantly, I had learned that while betrayal breaks the heart, it also creates space for it to reform into something stronger and wiser. That evening, as the sun set over the city, casting golden light across my living room, I opened a bottle of wine and raised a glass in a private toast. Not to the past, which no longer held power over me, nor to James, whose choices had set me on this unexpected path. Instead, I toasted to myself, to the woman who had emerged from the wreckage of betrayal, not just surviving, but thriving, creating a life of authenticity and purpose. The journey of healing was not complete. Perhaps it never would be entirely. There were still moments when grief would ambush me unexpectedly, when trust felt like a distant concept, when the scars of betrayal would ache. But those moments no longer defined my days. They were simply echoes of a past that had shaped but not confined me. As darkness fell over Chicago, the city lights creating a constellation of human connection and possibility, I felt a profound sense of peace. The woman who had once defined herself through her marriage, who had built her life around someone else's dreams and deceptions, was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who understood that the greatest love story was not about finding the perfect partner, but about becoming the person you were always meant to be. Sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings. I had lost a marriage built on lies, but found myself in the process. And that I now understood was the most precious gift of all. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ended up changing your life for the better? Sometimes what seems like our worst moment becomes the catalyst for our greatest transformation. Share your story in the comments below and remember to like and subscribe if this resonated with you. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and rediscovery. Remember, you are stronger than you know, and your best chapter may still be waiting to be written.